So welcome to the AVR Synopsis. Before we begin, I just want to quickly explain the run of show. My name is Catherine Suarez. I'm managing the back end, and we'll have about a 45-minute discussion followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. And there are two different ways where people can submit their questions. So you can click the Q&A button to type your questions in, and then I will read the questions out loud and the artist or executive director will answer them. Or if you'd like to ask your question yourself, then click the chat feature, and in the chat feature there's a button that says raise your hand. And then I'll call on your name and I will click the raise your hand button. Just make sure that your video is turned on and your microphone is turned on. And then you'll be able to ask the question yourself. And if you have any questions about this, you can chat me in the chat box. And with no further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Aristides Logothetis, the Executive Director of ARCAthens.
Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you everyone for joining us today for the Synopsis, a cross-cultural dialogue, which is a presentation culminating our second ARCAthens virtual residency, hosting this time two wonderful artists from the Bronx, Michael Paul Britto, and from the magical island of Crete, Linaradaki. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for your participation in this program. I'm going to just give a very brief description of ARCAthens, which is Artist Residency Center Athens. We are a New York City nonprofit dedicated to supporting artists, curators, and scholars, and giving them opportunities to further their research. We aim to support underrepresented communities and give voice to both advanced research as well as social justice. Our unique programs, all of them have the goal to build cross-cultural bridges to Greece, and the ARCAthens virtual residency is building a bridge specifically between the Bronx and Greece. The ARCAthens virtual residency is an Instagram takeover. We have given our fellows the opportunity to post their images and have a conversation with each other through their images and the text that it accompanies them. You can follow us on Instagram so that you can see daily the submissions, or if you don't have an Instagram account, we have an archive of the virtual residency on our website under programs, which I think is a really handsome web page. I'm very proud of it. So feel free to visit there to catch up on the AVR, and this, the synopsis video will be posted there as well. So let me introduce the fellows. Let's start with Michael Paul Britto, who is whose interdisciplinary practice spans a broad scope of media, from videos to digital photography, sculpture, collage, and performance. He has a BA from the City College, New York. His past residencies include the New Museum, Macmillan, the Mary Walsh Sharp Foundation, and LMCC, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. He has exhibited at El Museo del Barrio, the Studio Museum of Harlem, the Kitchen in New York, as well as internationally at the Zaketa National Gallery in Warsaw and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Britto has been written about in the New York Times, Art in America, and the Brooklyn Rail. He's also a teaching artist and the co-founder of Young Men of Color, which is a film video training program at Downtown Community Television in New York City. So welcome, Michael. Take us through a little journey of your work.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you right now and show you some stuff. Okay, so my name is Michael Paul Britto. I'm a visual artist. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a
Yes.
visual artist, DJ, and an arts educator. I'm gonna go through some of the stuff that inspires me. So personal events, popular culture, race relations, class issues, marginalized communities, and being a person of color. And this is some stuff from a show, a solo show that I had called Something in the Way of Things in 2015. So it was a mixture of collages and some bottle work. I consider the bottle work collages also because I'm using vinyl on just a 3D surface. So it's the same idea for me as it is on paper. I work in different mediums. So this is the sculptural section. So this is neon, I found neon sign with a digital print that I did in the middle. This is a glass bottle, plastic cap, synthetic hair, bottle blonde. This is a kente cloth Klansman outfit that I had made. This is Black Pride, White Privilege. It's mirrors and adhesive vinyl. This piece, A Night at Bo Willie Brown's, was inspired by for colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow wasn't enough. And this is the woman in red. This is her story, told on bottles. And this piece was, the curator had asked us to put together, he assigned different women from the poem, and we had to interpret that as an art piece. I work a lot in collage, and these are some of those collages. I usually use vinyl, or I cut from magazines in different texts, in different books. The silhouettes are actually taken from photographs. I actually have someone come and pose in the studio, and then I take the photograph and translate it into a silhouette, and I cut it out of, like I said, the vinyl or the magazine. Or sometimes I use laser prints too. The image that I cut from is as important as the silhouette is too, and sometimes there's a relation between the image and the actual thing that I cut from. This is Bristol board and vinyl. This piece was made from, it was about, it was based off of a movie. I can't remember. It was a movie's called Circus. I'm sorry. And the movie was about this woman who had an interracial child, and she was run out of America. In the movie, she actually gets on the train, and the train takes her to Russia, which is interesting. So she takes the train to Russia, and then she gets accepted by the circus. And this is the last scene in the movie where she found acceptance from one of the circus performers who accepted her and her biracial child. So what I did was I made a silk screen of that last frame of the movie, and I recast the film with American actresses, white American actresses who have adopted Black children, and that's where the series came from. So you have Madonna and her African child, Sandra Bullock and her African American child, and Charlize Theron and her African American child. I'm currently doing a residency at Tiger Strikes Asteroid in Brooklyn, and these are some stuff. These are some things that I'm working on right now. Some ideas I'm trying to work on right now. These are digital collages, which I do it in Illustrator. And I also do performance. this was a performance that I did where I created my own church, and I was dealing with the issue of the N-word and how we cannot erase it from our culture or our society. And I was like kind of celebrating it to let people know if you hear something enough that it doesn't have any meaning to it anymore. So I created a church where I had a choir, and I performed songs, hip hop songs that had the N-word in them a lot.
I see Bill Aguado smiling in the audience.
Yeah, it was cool. It was interesting. A lot of different people came to the show, and then as the show went on, people came and they dressed up and they knew some of the words and they participated. So it was really fun. Like if you see this woman with the black hat in the back, she came in first day, she came regular, and then she started wearing her church outfit and church hats. It was dope. And then I did this is another performance I did where I went around the community and asked men of color to write down on a dry erase board what they wanted the world to know about them. And it was really interesting, the conversations I had with people in the streets, and the stuff that they wrote was interesting too. So this was actually one day I went to Boogie on the Boulevard in the Bronx. And it was cool because a lot of the participants were really happy that anybody even wanted to took the time to have conversation with them and ask them like how they were feeling or what they wanted people to know about them. So it was really interesting. And then I went downtown to, this is a kitchen, like a homeless shelter across the street from DCTV. And I actually got some of the residents over there to participate too. And that was really cool. And doing this project was cool because I liked having the exchanges and the conversations with people. And this was in Harlem. I was did some of these in Harlem. I did them all over the city. And this is installation views from a show I did in Brooklyn at Momenta Arts, and it's called Shock and Awe. And it was I did a TED talk based off of the Willie Lynch letters, and then this was the work that surrounded that video. The White Woman's Tears is also a part of a video. The video is from The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and in this scene, Rebecca De Mornay is actually telling Ernie Hudson's character that no matter what he says, the people will believe whatever she tells people, they'll believe her over him. And the scene is very interesting because he plays a special needs person in this film, and she literally like bullies him, and it really bothered me, that scene. And it also made me think about a lot of the times when white women say things and then the public believes them, and they actually go out and look for these people that they describe, or like Emmett Till, the woman on her deathbed said it never happened, she lied. And then there was another woman who said that some black guys kidnapped her kids, and people actually got arrested, and she wound up being the one who did it. So it's interesting how somebody could create something in their mind, and then you could actually go out there and physically find people that fit those descriptions and hold them accountable for something they didn't do. So that's what that piece was inspired by. And machismo was also something that I was interested in, where being part Latino, like having like some of the stuff that Latino men are taught and that they think and feel and do is very interesting to me. So that's why I created this fake cologne called Machismo. I actually made the cologne mixed out of different colognes from the dollar store and stuff. So it's actually cologne. And then I based these little vignettes off of Calvin Klein advertisements. And also the dialogue comes from 1970s cologne ads from magazines that I did some research and got them. So some of the lines that he says in these little vignettes are from those magazines. So there's like 7 of them. And that's the cologne he's holding in his hand, the Machismo. And it was funny because in the gallery, when the piece was up, people were actually spraying it. And people were asking me, could they buy it? So it was interesting. So that's the end of my slideshow.
Well, that was wonderful. It certainly whet my appetite to see more and to see them in person. Your installation shots looked really fabulous.
Thank you.
And it makes me really, really want to see your work in person. So thank you for that. We'll come back to you to discuss the virtual residency, but now let me take a second to introduce our second virtual resident, Eirini Linardaki, who was born in Athens and studied at Limerick in Ireland, Limerick LIT in Ireland, Berlin, and Marseille. She lived in France for more than 20 years before moving to the island of Crete, where she's now based, developing projects mainly in the public sphere on Crete, Athens, Paris, and New York. She has exhibited in the Boijmans Museum, Rotterdam, Onassis Cultural Center, Athens, House of Cyprus in Greece, Salon de Montrouge, Freie Art Kunsthal, Geneva Natural History Museum, Macedonian Museum of Contemporary Art, Hamburg Kunsthaus, Rutgers University, Institut Français d'Athènes, John Jay College, and many others. In January 2020, she was one of the curators of the Night of Ideas and Philosophy for the French Institute of Greece. In February 2020, she organized and curated a residency in the workplace, an exhibition program, Occupy One, New York, in collaboration with the Consulate General of Greece in New York and the Cultural Services of the French Embassy in the USA, where artists were invited to work within the offices and in collaboration with administrative staff of the consulate and create art through dialogue with them. I was able to experience this building-wide collaboration, installation, and the artwork was incredible, as well as the whole concept of taking over and occupying the Greek consulate on 79th Street and making it a gallery and going into the offices of different staff members and seeing them interact with the artworks and even getting to meet them. So that was a really successful project. And with no further ado, Eirini Linardaki.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you, Aristides, for your kind words. So I'm Eirini Linardaki. I copied everything Michael said. I'm going to say exactly the same thing. So yes, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my work as well. I'm going here. And now I'm going to make. There you go. Can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Thank you. So yes, thank you, Aristides, for inviting me. Thank you, Katarina and Michael and everyone for being with us. What I wanted to say is that I'm very interested into bringing my art into the communities, like Michael does as well, but everybody in this different way. My objectives are to further develop community art projects. I want to identify and secure appropriate spaces that are not identified as art places all the time. I'm always trying to do this. I try to implement projects in the public space, and I'm always trying to redefine what public space is. I start with this slide because I went to Liberia about 10 years ago, and it was a very important moment in my career as an artist. I understood very slowly how much influence it had in my work. Liberia was a country that didn't have art spaces at all. I worked with students to create awareness over their problems, over the issues that they had in their everyday life living in post-war Liberia. What you see here is a depiction of an American dollar where obviously the president is African American and not white anymore. So I thought it was interesting because it's a sign, it's not an art piece. Is all these signs that they have everywhere for exchanging Liberty dollars with American dollars. So their dollars are called Liberties, and I found that very interesting. I started my career as a video artist. I mainly did videos that were narratives or videos that were questioning the position of women as they were depicted in art. So here you see a still. I went through the stuff that I shared with Michael over Instagram. So this is a video called Fountain that I think you saw, and I introduced it here as the beginning of my slideshow. Also, I have created a lot of boats through my career. This is one that's in Thessaloniki, in the Macedonian Museum of Contemporary Art. It's a raft and a bed. I also shared this in our exchange. I found that it was interesting to put it here because it seems like I started by making boats while I was a student, and I'm still making them. And I'm going to go through. It's because I find that traveling in many, many different ways, not only as a, leisure traveling, is one of the results of the current geopolitical situation in our world. In many cases, it's war, or it's fear, or it's poverty that makes people leave their homes and go to uncertain or dangerous futures. But also, in many cases, people just need to escape. Okay, it's not only when we have dangerous situations. It's fundamental to the human experience, in my opinion, to imagine an escape if we don't have it. So obviously this is a bed raft that really functions. So as you can see, we put it in the water, and the quality of the still is I really had to zoom in. So you see that the couple were able to drift away. I think it's also boats or rafts in this case are also a symbol of trying to escape also our choices and our conditions, whether we're privileged or not. And this is a video that was accompanying this project. Again, as with the other photo that you saw, the women are only contemplating the action that is happening, as you see a lot of paintings of women before the 20th century. And I have to tell you a little bit of a tale. As Aristides said, I moved to Crete 10 years ago. And Crete also doesn't have a lot of art spaces. Also, I moved at a time where I found myself being a mom and not so much of an artist anymore. It seemed to be very important with time because I lost myself. And when I say that I lost myself, I mean that all of a sudden I was in my life being mom of like 2 wonderful children and not practicing at all. And I remember I was sitting at the table and somebody said, "Oh, Eirini is married to an artist." And I was like, "What?" Yeah, so I was like, okay. So it created a struggle though that was very interesting for me to try to make new art that I could install in the public space, and it motivated me a lot. So here is something that you might recognize as well from Latin America, for those who have been there. Here they're called Athanati, which means immortal. And then there's plants where people go and write messages of love, and so on and so on. This is an homage to our Polytechnic school resurrection, which is what took down the dictatorship in 1973. On the right, if you see the right, well, the one with lots of hair is a famous statue in Greece. And the other version is the same person having aged the same way that our narratives from these rebellious times have changed. This is art that I made in my city, in the city of Heraklion. So because there was no art spaces, I worked a lot with what I found outside. So one thing was making stencils. One thing was using found objects. And this was a promenade that had a concrete promenade that had fallen and that I highlighted in yellow first. So the broken part of the promenade became a sculpture. Then more of it fell and I painted it red, and then all of it fell and I painted it, sorry, it was yellow, blue, and red in the end. There is more details from another one of those agavas. And this is public art that I made in New York that was made for children and users of the park to complete. They were boards where people could paint or that they could look through to see, to have a different point of view of the park. And we're going back to the woman who observes. And this is something you saw also in our Instagram takeover. And it was also sort of self-portrait, right? And here is an important point. I think I also shared it. It's a picture of my son in the Met Brower, right? And he is playing a video game, but he's observing me. And it was kind of an image. It was like a still of my life at that point, you know, trying to balance, you know, being careful of my son and yet seeing art going around. And I started by painting those. So then, at that time, I got very interested in archival material of explosions. I'm gonna just scroll through them because there are a lot. And then if there are any questions later, I can answer them. And this is a point where I got interested in those collections. Did you have those albums maybe where we used to collect the stickers and recreate the world? Yes, and I see Michael is. So I really love those. And I don't know, they fascinated me. And also I imagine a lot of people didn't make them the way they asked us to do it. So I wanted to use all this imagery, all this archival imagery, but change it, make it in a way so that the people who come to my shows can actually change the work. So I created magnetic collages, magnetic drawings at that point, like you see here. And here are my students at the Lower East Side Girls Club, where I was last year, using the explosion of the Challenger. There you go. And here's the result. And here is a new step. I also started making those at the Lower East Side Girls Club. So I have a big series of collages. We're going to talk more about them later, but I'm just going to go through them. They're all mine explosions, sea mine explosions that are detonated. These are not, these are war imagery. And these two, this is Syria. And then I got interested in using marble in my collages. So this one, you saw it before, is Ripple Rock. And here, I'm using it again. We'll talk more because there are also war archival images. This is from the Vietnam War. This is from Pearl Harbor. Then I used silhouettes, which I found interesting because I used all these patterns for public pieces when I worked with schools, and it kind of visually works well with Michael's work. And this is another that's in a school in upstate New York. And this is what I'm doing now. So I'm gonna finish with this. I'm gonna explain more, but I found that we are in a sort of symbolic isolation as artists. And I started working more on the fact that I live on an island that's physically isolated from the rest of the world, and trying to pretend that the rest of the world didn't exist in my head. So I started working with marble for a public piece. So these are all maquettes of what I'm doing right now. I'll show you what it looks like. Actually, right now it looks like this. I just came from doing this. It's a work in progress that I'm doing here in the city of Agios Nikolaos. And this is what I'm working on now. So I'm doing rafts again. These are images of scale models I made with my son in them. And these are also drawings. That's the stuff I'm doing right now. These are pieces that are going to be in a park next year, but I'm working on them now, and I'm also putting the marble element in them, as you can see. Oh, and here's a video. Sorry. That's it. I'm done.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work, Eirini. It looks wonderful, and I'm fascinated by the new project you're doing in Ayers Nikolaos. So good luck with
I
that.
tried not to go over my time.
I wanted, if maybe we can bring up a screen of maybe best our Instagram account, so if you can, so we can go over the virtual residency, which was a visual conversation between you, Eirini, and you, Michael. I want you guys to take over mostly and discuss this a little bit with us. But I also wanted to just refer to, because your work is so loaded with content and narrative. I also wanted to just defer a little bit to just the formal relationships, the visual relationships, the formal connections in your work, and maybe how you might have built a conversation partly around those visual relationships. Feel free to jump in, either of you.
Oh, okay. It was interesting when I was asked to do this. I was like, oh, like, how is this gonna work, right? Because I'm not even gonna lie to you. I work at a school during the day, so when we had to go virtual, I was like, I don't want to be online. I hate it. I don't want to do it. So, but then I thought about it, and I thought, oh, this would be cool, because I saw the previous virtual residency with Blanca, who I had a residency with also a while at Whitespace. And I was like, I checked it out and I watched it, I followed it, and I was like, this is kind of cool. This is interesting. So when I got to do it, I was like, oh my God. It's cool, because it's like, after we didn't do it, when it was over, I started like making sure I was available at 11 and 2 o'clock and trying to get ready to do it. But anyway, I'm going off and I could keep going on and on and on, but I'm gonna stop. So what happened when Eirini would post something, I would be like, oh, okay, so now I have to like think about what I'm gonna post next, right? It was like, to me, it was interesting, but it's also cool to see what she was gonna post, but also we actually had conversations like at the end of the week, and we also talked previously before it started to figure out the themes. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, what's that? You know, and it was cool. But then you have this time to think about what you're gonna post, you know, after you have like a couple of hours in between to figure out what you're gonna do. And our first conversation was about the Bronx and how it meant something completely different in Greece. And I kept thinking about that, like, the Bronx. That conversation was cool. So then I was like, I want to do some stuff about the Bronx, because since we've been quarantined, I've been walking around my neighborhood, which I probably, if we weren't quarantined, I probably wouldn't have done. So I got to see a lot of stuff in the neighborhood and explore. So I took some pictures. So the first day after the first post, that was what I did. I put together some pictures about the Bronx to reference our conversation about it, but also think about, like, people have misconceptions about the Bronx, and I even had some, and I live here. So it was interesting, you know, to put that stuff up and then get feedback on it.
Eirini, do you have something to chime in with on I guess, the visual structure of your conversation,
yes.
Michael?
Yes. Well, first of all, it's exactly the same, but for Crete. So all of a sudden, I was like, you know, I felt after we had this conversation, I was like, okay, so I should focus on, you know, showing to Michael what, you know, my life here. So I always had this in mind, and to actually bring this isolation that you're talking about, it's very important, because it made us more aware of exactly where we are. You know, because as artists, we travel all over the world, or we travel through different parts of our town. But it made me aware of exactly where I was. And this happened, you know, at a time that's normally quiet for all of us. But also it made me dig into my works. I thought it was going to be different. I thought I was going to be like showing the stuff that's in progress and, you know, show you what it's like to be here. But then all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, but I have something that goes well with what Michael posted, only it's like 10 years old. But because I kept doing this, yesterday when I was trying to make, you know, the structure of what I was going to show, I figured out the line that was connecting all those pieces just by sharing them with you. Like when I went back to share, you know, videos that were showing, because of our last week that was about gender, and I don't think that I work so much on gender issues. But then I was like, okay, but what are gender issues? Okay, and then I, you know, I had to like go back and look at stuff that I haven't looked at for years, you know. So that was very interesting. Yeah. But also, you know, the forms of your collages and of my collages worked really well together. I mean, we could have spent 4 weeks just sharing our collages. Right.
Yeah. It was interesting because I had like this residency made me kind of rediscover myself, actually, because there were things that I was pulling out old hard drives. I was digging through things. I was like saying, what happened to you? Like, why did you stop making this? What did you, you know? And it started to make me think about like where I was, what I was doing, what I was thinking about. Because this whole quarantine, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I've been depressed. I've been like thinking, is art important? Should I still make it? Do people really care? And then all of a sudden the Black Lives Matter thing started, and then people started to reach out to me saying, hey, your work has been talking about this for so long. How do you feel about what's going on? And are you making anything in reference to it? But I'm gonna honestly tell you, I totally shut down when it happened. And I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to hear about it. And it was interesting because normally I would have ran to that, right? But I just like, it made me like, I just couldn't take it. It was just too much. And I like literally shut down. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to talk about it. And people thought I was in here making art, like going crazy making art. And I was like, no, not doing that. And I also thought too, with this residency, I thought I could make something new every single day. I'll make new collages and post them and I'll find pictures. But it wasn't about that. And it wasn't what I thought it was. And I'm glad it was what it was for me, but I didn't approach it like I thought I would. It was completely different for me, like what I thought.
Michael, I think that I'm gonna venture a guess and say that every person attending this and hearing your words can relate. I think that the expectation that because we're quarantined and are forced to be in our interior spaces is going to give us all this energy and time to be productive and creative has been an additional burden for a lot of people, just trying to manage the angst of this pandemic, and then on top of it, turn it around and make it a productive, creative time. We're navigating this, but the ready-made expectation that we're just going to respond that way was an additional source of angst, I think, for a lot of people. Also, I think it's very interesting to hear both of you take a certain pleasure in digging into your old work and curating it in response to each other's visual prompt. I'm obviously titillated by that because ARCAthens supports visual artists and curators, and I'm particularly interested in where the lines blur between a creative in the studio and a creative in a gallery or in an exhibition. So I love that you benefited from the process of curating your work. And if we can just stick a little bit longer to the visual relationships and visual connections, Eirini, I want to talk a little about your piece, The Monster, which is digital collage. It's you say an explosion shook the city of Beirut yesterday. When you posted that, it was just after. we were all in shock. You've done a series of these collages, which are quite beautiful, in which you explore explosions in the sea, like your piece Pearl Harbor,
Yes.
or in the sky, like your piece Challenger. Can you talk a little about both your the formal relationships, for example, the collage element of the explosion, and why you use the material of fabric to construct the explosion, as well as your motivation, your drive to depict these events?
Thank you. Well, over the past few years, I have produced a series of all sorts of apocalyptic events, starting with the Challenger. I think the Challenger is one of the most ancient ones. No, Pearl Harbor is the oldest one. That come from around the world. They're fueled by my interest in history, first of all, and all the tragedies that go with it, and what's the form of a tragedy, you know, because it has a form. We have seen tragedies that we haven't witnessed with our own eyes. I'm thinking about the younger people, you know, the Twin Towers. The Challenger was very important for me because I remember seeing it live on television as a child. And I know that it was broadcasted in every classroom in America that could, because there was a teacher in it, okay? And a lot of them, we just know them by photo, you know, like Pearl Harbor, Vietnam images. So very, you know, before I started doing those collages, especially, there was a World War II naval mine that was discovered in the city where I live. And it was detonated just a few meters from the coast. So basically that was there for all those decades. Nobody knew about it. It was very near my family's house. So we went for a walk and we actually witnessed this huge explosion. And it had a very, very strong impact on me, but especially as a visual result. And so I started going through, you know, I started looking at the people around me. Of course, there are many people who are just standing there in awe, you know, but there were also people that were older who were immediately in a different kind of shock. Obviously, it for me was also like a performance, because it's somebody who goes there on purpose and detonates the mine, you know. There are many in the Baltic Sea, as I found later on. You know, they all throw this huge amount of water into the atmosphere. And while it's happening, like I went through videos of explosions so you can see them, you know, frame by frame. So it's size as a form and as a mass impressed me very much as a form. So the digital collages, are basically patterns from fabrics that I collect through the communities I work with in general. So if I'm working with a community in Newark, for example, I worked 2 times in big projects in Newark, New Jersey, where I asked the participants to bring in their own collective fabrics, like from their grandparents, from their friends, from the shops in their community. I'm very interested in patterns since I went to Liberia, I think, because I figured out that what we call African fabrics, for example, are in reality the patterns, they're called wax. And these were Dutch fabrics that were copied from Indonesian patterns. They made them for Indonesia, then the Indonesians were like, no, that's not very nice, we don't want them. And the Dutch were like, but these are beautiful. Okay, let's sell them somewhere else. And because they were so bright and beautiful, they became a huge bestseller in Africa. And now we know them, you know, in communities that have African American, but also I have participants who bring me stuff from Japan, you know, from all places of the world. So what I do is I put layers. I love collage since I was a child. So these fabrics basically hide the form. They hide everything of the explosion. So basically you only have the form, you only have the shape in the end. And all these layers speak, you know, the way I structure it, it speaks of the suddenness, you know, it has a very strong result. The monster in particular and other are from Lebanon and Syria. So they are from actual mines that are, or bombs that are there to kill people, you know. So I find it interesting to use the forms also because it's also an immensity, you know, it's so massive that it's impressive just as a form, because once you have it, you know, it's a human-made killing machine, you know. The idea that this exists and that it has a form and that I'm fascinated by the form, it's, you know, an ongoing process.
I understand what you mean, especially if we're going to talk about form, scale, the scale of the explosion, the scale of the sound, the scale of the impact. Scale is one of the most important elements of form for impact and to impress a viewer. So I can definitely relate with that, just as I can with your fascination about the wax fabrics, which I find fascinating. I think that Yinka Shonibare has worked with this idea as well, and the contradictions that come with how visual ideas relate cross-culturally, especially through the lens of colonization. I think it's really, really interesting. Let's now take a little dive into content with Michael. And I'm gonna frame my question to you, Michael. Thanks to the internet and of course our mission, ARCAthens has an international audience. But since we're an American organization with a focus on Greece, I'd like to ask you, Michael, to talk a little about your piece, Black Pride, White Privilege. It's a mirror sculpture. And I will tell you why I'm particularly interested. As a Greek immigrant, coming to the US and assimilating in its social structure, I noticed many shared relationships with the Black community through the lens of otherness, through the sense of being considered non-white, feeling victimized, the Greeks feeling colonized, even through the identification to slavery. For those of you that don't know, interestingly, Greeks and Jews both share a 400 years of slavery identity narrative with the African-American community, although in different contexts, of course. So I see commonalities between the Greek and the Black community. And here I wanted to bring up the concept of pride, Black pride, Greek pride. For Greeks, pride has been a reserve used to develop identity, initially during its liberation from the Ottomans, but more recently under circumstances when the Greek society was ailing, feeling undervalued, demonized, or outright attacked, especially recently in their financial crisis, where Northern Europeans were very biased, and they weaponized their bias for financial reasons. The elevation and constant memory of the ancients has been a source of pride and has served to strengthen Greeks' resolve to make their society work in adverse conditions. But the constant memory of the ancients has also acted to haunt contemporary Greeks, limiting their view of their evolving identity, and also has crossed certain lines into nationalism, arrogance, outright delusion sometimes. As a matter of fact, some Greeks today argue that pride based on the ancients is an example of maybe a continuing colonization, a residue, since this reverence for the ancients began and flowered in colonial Europe during a time when the Greeks were occupied and not so concerned with their past glories. So it was sort of imported pride. So from this lens, I would be so interested to hear about your ideas regarding Black pride and how it serves and relates to the Black community. I also wanted to just say that the accompanying message of your work, and it's inextricable from the whole message, white privilege, is arguably a more urgent and poignant topic. But I believe, let's assume that our synopsis audience might be well versed in the problematic complexities regarding white privilege, which our national conversation has been illuminating. So let's talk about Black pride. Give me share your mind about Black pride.
Okay, so I think I mentioned this earlier. I work with young people, and I found that like a lot of the young people that I work with, they didn't have any sense of pride. And I think that the reason why they didn't have any sense of pride is because of white privilege. And I think that white privilege takes that pride away. and it made them, a lot of them, not want to distance themselves from it. Like back in the 70s, Black power was a big thing. Black is beautiful, Black is this, Black is that, and people really into accepting that and owning that. And a lot of young people that I deal with now, they don't. And a lot of things that they, like for instance, some of them don't hold people responsible when they say their names wrong. They don't know their history. They're not taught their history. So like when I thought about making this piece, I thought about it like how white privilege takes away Black pride for a lot of people, and how it's a revolving door. And that's why I needed the piece to be in the corner. And that's why I just wanted it to be words. Because I was like, I went to this phase where everything with me I wanted everything to be about words. And I wanted everything to be like with people in mirrors, where people saw themselves in the piece, where people actually looked at the piece and saw themselves. Because I'm the type of person, I don't like mirrors. I don't like to see myself in the mirror. I don't know what that's about. That's my own personal hang-ups, but I don't like looking in mirrors. So it was interesting that I decided to make pieces where I was working with mirrors. So I had to, like, while I'm creating these things, I'm seeing myself in the work as I'm making the work. So it's interesting for me to put something out where people had to look and confront these things, like if they went into a space. But now it's interesting that we seem to be going back. Now we seem to be going back to Black pride. We seem to be going back like Black Girl Magic, and people being happy about who they are and owning who they are, and Black Lives Mattering and all that kind of stuff. And I see we're going back to that, but it's also interesting the things that people allow other people to say to them, and how people let them, like, you know, how people are treated and stuff like that. So we still need to work on some of that stuff, but that was the idea behind, like, it was sad to me that a lot of young people didn't have a sense of pride, you know, from where they were from and stuff like that. And that's what I try to put, like, because I figure, like, when I was younger and I used to go to museums, and even I used to go to museums because I didn't go to galleries when I was younger. I started doing that on my own, but I used to go to museums and stuff and not feel like it was a place for me. I didn't feel like it was, I didn't identify with anything. So when I started to do art, I wanted to do stuff where if a young person of color or a person of color went into an art space and they saw some of my work, they saw themselves in it and they identified with it, and they made them want to maybe seek out more or want to see more or try to find out more about, you know, what I was trying to say. And that's what I try, because I feel like I want, like, when I make work, I want work that's going to endure. I don't want to make things that are like, just like, you know, you make them and then that's it, people see them and they go away. I want it to be something like, if it was in a capsule and somebody dug it up, you could still get something out of it. I just feel like, and because I did the same thing. I started off as a video artist as well. And the same thing when I was in film school, I used to, like, you know, we would do these assignments, but I always felt like the assignment shouldn't just be something to throw away. It should be something that you could put on your reel or something that you could just keep. So when I make work, I just don't want to make things to make things. And that also gets in the way of like, I don't know. I tend to babble on, so you have to stop me sometimes.
I appreciate you answering that, and it makes so much sense. I can talk about this a little more, and it kind of begs for a follow-up with another work of yours. But before we do that, let me check in with Kat, because I think we're going into our question and answer portion. Do we have people been sending in questions, or should we just continue?
We do have one question from Blanca, who says, "It has been wonderful to follow your exchanges on Instagram and to listen to you speak about your work and your experience with the virtual residency today. Since you both already noticed that you have commonalities within your work, have you considered collaborating in the future? I hope so," she says.
Yes, Michael is coming to Crete. We established that.
I'm going there. Yes, you are.
Amazing.
I want to come too.
Yes, Aristides, you can all come. Let's just say, you can all come.
I want to get in that bed raft.
Obviously there is the nice part now is that once we have created this exchange, you know, and we went through it and we managed to really pay attention one to the other, I think really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think now we can actually have time to talk that's not set on time and see how we can get everyone to, as you know, it's very, your work is very interesting. And also it has, I mean, it has a little bit of humor in it. That's just the right amount.
I try to put humor in it because sometimes the messages and the topics are so much. Like I feel like you have to put humor in it to make it more digestible and also make it not so standoffish for some people. And I know people think that like when I put humor in certain things, I'm trivializing it, but I'm not really. I'm just trying to make it not so hard because some of it is hard. And sometimes the lives that we live, sometimes you have to like find ways to laugh at some of it and find the humor in it sometimes because that's the only way to get through it for me. Like I have to find ways to laugh at things because I'll go crazy.
And I'll agree completely in how you're utilizing humor because these are hard. These are hard narratives that you're approaching. Kat, do we have any more questions or can I go on?
Oh, you can go on.
So let's speaking of humor, let's talk a little about your work, Mending Oh No.
Mending Oh No.
Mending Oh No, which is, I'm forgetting the actor's name.
Oh, oh yeah, me too. Jeez, I'm
Okay.
drawing a blank.
So,
The guy from Get Out. Oh my
right,
God.
Get Out.
Get Out.
And you've made him almost like a chocolate lollipop for consumption.
Yes.
And you're talking about the pathology of interracial desire and the hypersexualized black male and the performance of whiteness. And these are huge topics. They somewhat relate to what we spoke previously about Black pride and how you might feel a pride in your, let's say, in your mind, in your soul, in your capacity, but also in your good looks, in your charisma, in your physical prowess. But maybe, you know, that pride or people's relationship, oh, there's the image, to that might have an adverse effect where it becomes hypersexualized or caricatured and can then serve to maybe act as a trap. Any I mean, do we want to talk about Mandingo? No.
No, it's just well, when I first I thought about it because I remember it's the same thing about like when things are in fashion and things are in style. I remember back in the day, a friend of mine, his name was Nigel, and he was trying to get into modeling. And I remember there was one point where every dark-skinned black man who would walk down the street downtown was like, he would just like, everybody would like want to be with him. And Nigel was pretty nerdy, math geek, never thought about it, but his looks took him into a whole different place. And then I also thought about this in relation to white women's tears, how you can, you know, you get scared for these guys, you know, when they get fetishized and you think that, you know, what's going to happen to them if one thing goes wrong or somebody decides to not be happy with the fact that, you know, someone else is after them or wants to be with them. But it's just interesting how you see these people like they want to be with these men of color, but then they only want to be with them up to a certain point, and then they don't want to deal with any of the other stuff that goes with that.
Right. It's another way that people can be victimized through objectification. Well, if we have no more questions, our time is up. I mean, I wouldn't want to close this conversation because it's sort of the close of the program, and I've enjoyed it so much, our weekly Zoom meetings, and all our chats and all your insights has been so fruitful for me. So I want to thank you so much. Are there any more questions, Kat, that we're not seeing?
It's just a comment from Xanda McCag, who says, thank you both, fantastic work, inspired by the impact of your collaboration.
Thank you.
So I would like to thank both our fellows, Michael Paul Britto and Eirini Linardaki, for participating in our virtual residency program, sharing their work and ideas with our international community. I'd like to thank our board of directors and our advisory council, the infrastructure of support for ARCAthens, as well as the staff, with a particular mention to Clayton Campo, who was central in the vision of the virtual residency, as well as Kat Suarez, who has been guiding us securely through the logistics of webinar technology. But mostly I'd like to thank you, our audience and supporters, for coming today and getting to know Michael and Eirini a little better. We are going to keep an eye on their development, especially their upcoming collaboration in Crete. We're here to serve you, our audience, and we will be sending you a short survey to help us understand your feelings and take suggestions about our future webinars. So if you don't mind filling that out, it'll be short. The AVR program will take a small hiatus, but we will be back in the late fall with an additional virtual program that we're currently designing. I don't want to say much more about that, but please stay tuned. I'll be so excited to share with you soon. If you would like to make a donation to ARCAthens and help us continue our programming, please visit our website and make your contribution securely online on our support page. And thank you our fellows, thank you everybody for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your August.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
This was amazing.
Thank you. This was.
More soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.